Janus Pananius. Born August 29, 1434 in Xesmas, died Mary 27, 1472 in Medvevar. Poet. Hungarian name, Janus Xesmaze. Took Latin name from Pannonia, an area south and west of Danube. Descendant of lesser aristocracy in poor economic circumstances. Raised for a time by widowed mother, beginning in 1447 he attended famous humanistic universities of Ferrara, Padua, and Venice with support of János Vitéz, Bishop of Varad. Studied under Guarino de Verona at Ferrara. Spent 14 years in Italy with interruptions. Began to write poetry while in Italy, mainly panegyrics. Named Canon of Varad in 1454. Obtained doctorate and went on tour of Italy before his return to Hungary in 1458, where he received post in royal chancellery in Buda and soon became Bishop of Pécs, 1459 to 1472. Headed delegation to Rome in 1465 to seek help from Pope Paul II against Turks. Accompanied King Matthias on military expedition to Czechoslovakia in 1468 and then assumed responsibility for defense of southern Hungary. Appointed Viceroy of Slavonia about 1470. Participated in plot against King Matthias and died during escape. Had a very significant role in the development of Hungarian literature. Strong humanist, Hungary's first lyric poet of contemporary note. First to give individuality high place and to view mainly reality and lyricism of Hungarian life. Preserved many experiences of his daily life in numerous epigrams. Expression of personal thoughts highly lyrical. Today his elegiac poetry is more valuable than his earlier poetic creations. He also translated Homer, Plutarch, and Demos thence into Latin. A volume of his collect works became part of the library of King Matthias. Some of his poems have been translated into Italian. Jikli Zoltan. Born April 24, 1913 in Nagyenid. Poet, novelist, translator. Father was Lajos Aprili, QV. Attended schools in Nagyenid and Kolosvar. Family moved to Budapest in 1924. Completed studies in Hungarian and French at Jewish Collegium. Obtained position at National Zekanai Library in 1935. Poems appeared in Nyugat, Erdei Helican, Velaz, and Zepso in 1930s. Visited Paris and Italy in 1937 and Rome in 1940. Awarded Baumgarten Prize in 1939. Moved to Kolosvar in 1941 and employed by Library of University of Kolosvar. Worked as staff member of the Legasag 1944 to 1946. Returned to Budapest and again obtained post at National Zekanai Library. At present devoting entire time to writing. Member of so-called third generation of Nyugat schools. Poems elegiac and nostalgic. Concerned with philosophical questions. Early novels based on autobiographical materials, later ones on adventure. Among the best translators in Hungary, has translated some of the works of Dante, Racine, Shakespeare, and Romanian poets. Some of his poems have been translated into German and Polish. Jokai Moore. Born February 18, 1825 in Komárom, died May 5, 1904 in Budapest. Novelist, short story writer, poet, dramatist. Father a lawyer, aristocratic family. Attended Reformed Gymnasium in Komárom. In 1835 was sent to school in Pozsony, where he learned German. Resumed studies at home in 1837. Short poem published in Tarsakodo in 1834. Began studies at Reformatus Collegium in Papa in 1841, where his skills in writing and painting distinguished him, and he began friendship with Sandor Patofi, QV. Studied law in Kexkmet 1842 to 1844. Law apprentice in 1845, passed examination in 1846, but after winning first case, the success of his first novel caused him to abandon law career. Undertook editorship of Elet Kepek in 1847, with Patofi as best-known associate. Became one of leaders in youth activities during March 1848. Married Rosa Laborvalvi in summer 1848. Fled to Debrecen with Kossuth government in 1849. After collapse of revolution he hid for a time in Tardana in Buk Mountains. Returned to Pest in 1850, where he devoted himself to political, editorial, newspaper, and literary activities. Founded Nagy Tukar in 1856, Ustokos in 1858, and Ahan in 1863. Member of Academy in 1858, Kisfaludy Tarsasic in 1860. Parliamentary representative in 1861 and 1865 to 1896, but lessened political and editorial activities in 1880s. Visited Paris twice and Italy several times. Elected first president of Patofi Tarsasic in 1876. Greatly depressed by wife's death in 1886, his care was undertaken for a time by adopted daughter. Married Bella Grosch in 1899. Warmly received by French writers and artists during visit to Paris Exposition in 1900. Continued to write during last years. Most distinguished writer of romantic fiction in Hungary. Established novel as genre in Hungarian literature. So prolific that his works are still not collected into a complete edition. Novels and short stories filled with exotica and fantasy from all ages and parts of world, portray ideal world and express optimistic view to sustain hopes of Hungarians for better life. Power to build legends responsible for romantic views of leading 19th century figures in Hungary and participants in revolution of 1848 to 1849 by which succeeding generations remember them. Does not seek to penetrate character or situation but to weave delightful impressions and to decorate with ever richer colors. Noted for variety and richness of themes, descriptive and structural artistry, and skillful use of language. His short stories are excellent, his poetry, mostly political, inferior, his dramas are of little interest, though numerous. Many of his novels have been translated into Armenian, Bulgarian, Chinese, Croatian, Czech, Danish, Dutch, English, Estonian, Finnish, French, German, mainly, Hebrew, Italian, Latvian, Lithuanian, Polish, Romanian, Russian, Ruthenian, Serbian, Slovakian, Slovenian, Spanish, Swedish, Turkish, and Ukrainian. Editions of his short stories are available in Czech, English, Estonian, Finnish, French, German, Italian, Polish, Serbian, and Swedish. Josica Miklos. Born April 28, 1794 in Turda, died February 27, 1865 in Dresden, Germany. Novelist, short story writer, dramatist. Descendant of ancient aristocratic family. Left studies at Piarist Gymnasium in Kolosvar in 1811 with father's permission to become army officer candidate. In 1812 he left Transylvania with cavalry regiment to campaign against Napoleon in Poland and Italy. Became lieutenant in 1813, first lieutenant in 1814, captain at time of Congress of Vienna. On duty in Paris in 1815. Experimented unsuccessfully with writing dramas in German. Married Erzsébet Calais in 1818. Resigned from army in 1818 and returned to Turda. Lived in Transylvania and Navkar. Marriage was unhappy. Sought escape in farming and revelry. After 1824 he lived mostly on family estates in Broniecka and Serdok. During 1828 to 1829 his first poems appeared in Felso Magyarzajai Minerva under pseudonym, Gabor F. Moroskaza. Lived in Pest for 6 months in 1831 where he became acquainted with famous writers and politicians, some of whom encouraged him to publish novels he had already written at Serdok. Attended parliamentary session in Transylvania in 1834. Became corresponding member of Academy in 1835 on publication of Irani and Vaslatok. After success of first published novel, Abafi, 1836, devoted energies mainly to writing fiction and occasional drama. Became member of Kisfaludy Tarsasic in 1836, its president in 1842. Became Protestant, and granted divorce in 1847, he married Julia Podmaniski. When Transylvania declared union with Hungary in 1848 he was member of committee named to carry out action. Attended parliamentary session called for July 4, 1848, and became delegate to Upper House. Went to Debrecen with government at end of 1848, and followed it to Zajt and Arad. After failure of revolution fled with wife to Galicia, then to Leipzig. Escaped capture by going to Brussels in May 1850, and lived there under difficult financial circumstances. Wife sold lace, he translated novels into German for income. Moved to Dresden in 1864. Among first important novelists in Hungary. 25 years of creativity produced mainly historical novels, which gained great popularity in period. Also experimented with romantic, adventurous historical novel. Used narrative techniques of Sir Walter Scott. Sought to recreate environment of past. Wrote many dramas and short stories, some in French and German. Complete works in German published in Pest 1839 to 1844. Aksahuk Magyarzagon, Azajidi Boshorkanyok, Jessica Istvan, and Zirányi, Akolto have been translated into German, Abafi into German and Turkish, Ahudlan Hiv into Czech, Az Yutalso Battery into German and Polish, and Joa Tatar into English, and some of his short stories into German. Joseph Attila. Born April 11, 1905 in Budapest, died December 3, 1937 in Balaton Sarzo. Poet, translator. Father a soap maker who left family in 1908 to go to the United States to make money for support of family but got only as far as Romania and never returned. Mother soon forced to board Joseph and a sister with peasant family in Oxford through Orzagos Gyermek Vito Liga. Joseph was 7 when mother was able to support the family herself with earnings from domestic work. Family lived under continuing difficult circumstances, and children were forced to earn money through odd jobs. During World War I mother's health worsened, and children were often in care of other families. In summer 1918 Joseph spent a few weeks in Ivica on organized holiday for children. He was writing poetry regularly by this time. Went to relatives in Savitsalis for food, mother dead by the time he returned. At this time his sister, Jolin, married Odin Mackay and undertook care of Joseph and his younger sister. Tried to become deck boy for a time. Joseph was sent to boarding school in Moscow to resume studies, where he was an outstanding student. Worked guarding cornfields during summer. Attempted suicide and abandoned school studies. His poetry gained attention of Giola Juhas, QV, who helped him to publish poems in periodicals and wrote introduction to his first published volume, Zipsake Koljasa, 1922. Became independent financially through work as tutor and laborer, completed gymnasium studies, and entered University of Zaj to study Hungarian and French. Left university when professor vowed to use any means to bar him from teaching career because of attitude. Went to Vienna in 1925 with help of brother-in-law to study at university. Became acquainted with emigrant writers, Lehos Kasik, Tibor Duri, Bela Balash, QQV, Gyurgy Lukács, and Ernie Meth, who became best friend, and Lajos Hatvany. Shortly after return to Budapest, went to Paris in 1926 with help of Lajos Hatvany. Studied at Sorbonne, became acquainted with works of Marx, Hegel, and Lenin and with workers' movement, and joined Union Anarchist Communist. Returned to Budapest in 1927. Poems were published in many periodicals and dailies, including Nepsava, Pesti Naplo, Nyugat, Atol, and Korink. Resumed studies briefly at University of Budapest. Formed firm friendship with Gyula Illis, QV. Knew French and German, shorthand, and typing, but could not obtain steady employment. Loved girl from middle-class family, but marriage did not take place. Hospitalized at this time because of neurasthenia. Increased political activities at end of 1920s. Joined Socialist Party in 1929 and Communist Party in 1930, for which he conducted seminars and lectures in Ujapest, Alfold, Rakos Palata, and Ferencváros. Attended illegal meetings and supported workers' cause by his writings. Participated in revolutionary mass demonstration on September L, 1930. Founded periodical, Velocig, in 1932, which was quickly banned by police. Often arrested for political activities. Insisted on combining ideas of Marx and Freud in lectures. Severed connection with Communist Party in 1935 because of differences in views. Already considered as outstanding poet by Deso Kostelany, Mihaly Babits, QQV, György Balint, and Gabor Halás. Broke friendship with Judith Santo. Love affairs continued to be unhappy. Became editor of newly founded Zepso in 1936. Obtained grants from Baumgarten Foundation in 1936 and 1937. Grew increasingly despondent, with sense of being abandoned in alien world. Spent several months in hospital with help of friends. Care undertaken by sisters in Balaton Sarzo. Gave up hope of cure in this isolation and ended life by throwing himself under wheels of passing freight train. Awarded Kossuth Prize for life work in 1948. One of the most important lyric poets in 20th century Hungarian literature. Individuality emerged over long period of time through numerous Hungarian and foreign literary influences. Poems are full of humanism and willpower and of desire for unity with outer world. Socialistic themes stem from love of mankind. Used great variety of poetic forms and techniques with skill. Translated numerous authors, as well as European and African folk poetry, among them, J. Ora, P. Bizruk, J. Wolker, Mayakovsky, S. Yesenin, A. Bloch, Verhaeren, Rambo, and Villain, probably his best. Editions of his poems are available in Bulgarian, Chinese, Croatian, Czech, French, German, Italian, Polish, Romanian, and Russian, and some of his poems have been translated into Arabian, English, Finnish, Hebrew, Slovakian, and Swedish. Juhas Gyula. Born April 4, 1883 in Zajd. Died April 6, 1937 in Zajd. Poet, journalist, teacher. Father an official in telegraph office. Spent most of life in Zajd. Completed studies at Prist Gymnasium in Zajd and in 1899 entered Prist Novitiate in Vac. First poems already appearing in Zagidi Naplo. Left novitiate after 6 months because of interest in poetry and unhappy experiences as novice. After years lapse resumed schooling. Father's death strongly affected him, and he again considered becoming priest. With financial help of relatives studied Hungarian and Latin at University of Budapest 1902 to 1906. Became friend of Mihaly Babits, Deso Kostelany, QQV, and Gabor Halás at university and prepared for career as poet. Met Andrade, QV, in 1905. Obtained teaching position at Prist Gymnasium in Maramarazsaget in fall 1906. Disappeared from city in February 1907 with apparent intention, unfulfilled, to commit suicide. Nervous condition, which first appeared in summer 1903, kept recurring throughout life. On obtaining teaching certificate he took position with PRS Gymnasium in Leva in fall of 1907, but after 4 months left for Budapest without notice. Returned to Zicht, lost teaching position, and again considered becoming a priest. Obtained temporary position with Premonstratensian Gymnasium in Nagyvarad, where he became co-founder of a whole-nap anthology and met Anna Sarveri, an actress, who inspired much of his love poetry. Lost position in 1911 and obtained position with high school in Zakalka. Isolation damaged health. He was greatly depressed at time of transfer to high school in Moscow in fall 1913. Shot himself in chest in hotel in Pest on March 6, 1914, but recovered in Rokas Hospital, where he was visited by Julia E. Orsi, a writer, who inspired his poems for several years. Became melancholy again at end of 1916, and in 1917 spent 9 months in Moravcsik Clinic in Budapest. Recovered slowly at home in Zicht and resumed writing at end of February 1918. Participated actively in support of October Revolution in 1918. After failure of revolutionary government he was forced to earn living entirely from writings and newspaper work. Became member of Social Democratic Party. Articles and poems appeared in Munka. Became president of Munkastocker in Zicht and lecturer for workers' seminars. Member of Patofi Tarsasik in 1920. Brought to court in 1925 because of newspaper article he wrote, but charge was dismissed. Visited Vienna in 1926. At end of 1928, he received pension with help of friends, awarded Baumgarten Prize in January 1929. Melancholia intensified, and he spent most of 1929 in Schwarzer Sanatorium and then in psychiatric clinic in Zicht. Awarded Baumgarten Prize again in 1930 and 1931 but withdrew increasingly into himself. Spent last years between home and psychiatric clinic in Zicht. Thoughts turned increasingly to suicide and he ended life by taking Veronal. One of the most important lyric poets in 20th century Hungarian literature. Poems characterized by conflict between Christian consciousness of guilt and pagan longing for life. Early world outlook influenced by Nietzsche, Ibsen, and Tolstoy. Saw sorrow in his human condition and that of man. Poems also contained wonder at and longing for life and love for man which sometimes counteracted his pessimism. Used wide variety of verse forms and made ballad form a villain native in Hungarian poetry. Most important poet of workers' life before Attila Joseph, QV. An edition of his poems is available in Russian, and some of his poems have been translated into Bulgarian, English, French, German, Italian, Japanese, Romanian, Serbian, and Slovakian. Just Zsigmond. Born February 16, 1863 in Puz-Tassendernia, died October 9, 1894 in Caen, France. Novelist, short story writer. Descendant of aristocratic family with landed estates. Completed upper gymnasium and university studies in Budapest and law studies in Paris. Spent many years in Paris, where he attended Hippolyte Taine's lectures and became acquainted with Copy, Daudet, Anatole France, and Sully Prudhomme. Search for cure of tuberculosis took him to shores of Mediterranean. Visited Africa and Asia and lived in India for time. In Zandernia established library for use of villagers and theatre with peasants forming company of actors, who performed plays of Shakespeare and Molière. For time he was a staff member of Ahead, edited by Joseph Kiss, QV. In 1894 dedicated permanent building for peasant theatre in Zandernia. In fall of same year, suffering severely from tuberculosis, he went to Paris and then, in own words, to Caen to die. His early writings were much influenced by French literature, especially Balzac and Zola. Planned 14-volume novel cycle on Hungarian society with title A Kivalas Genesis, but completed only Appens Legendaja, Ganyo Julksa, and Flimis. Most of his works are concerned with social reform. Novels and short stories deal with landowning aristocracy and peasants. Saw major hope for Hungary in reformation of aristocracy but viewed its members with skepticism and irony. Among the first to express inner tensions of peasants and their desire for improvement of their condition. A Puszta Könyv has been translated into French, and some of his short stories into German. Kafka Margit. Born June 10, 1880 in Nagy Károly, died December 1, 1918 in Budapest. Novelist, short story writer, poet. Descendant of family of gentry, which was poor by time of her birth, father a lawyer. After father's death, when she was 6, she lived with mother in Satmar, where she completed her schooling and obtained teaching certificate in 1898. Taught in Charitable Institute in Miskolc 1898 to 1899 and then registered in Erzsébet Skola, from which she obtained certificate to teach in higher elementary schools in 1902. Devoted most of her time for 15 years to teaching in Miskolc and Budapest. Married Bruno Fröhlich in 1905, divorced him in 1910. Her poems began to appear in Magyar Genius in 1901. She was associated with Nyugat from its founding in 1908, and began to publish fiction in 1905. In 1914 married Irvin Bauer, physician, and younger brother of Bela Balázs, QV. During World War I lived in Budapest and Temesvar, where her husband was stationed. Gave up teaching to devote time to literary career in 1915, including various kinds of publicist writings. Both she and son died of influenza near end of war. Wrote poetry, but her novels and short stories make her the foremost woman writer in Hungarian literature and place her on a level with major literary figures of her own times. Central themes: decay of gentry and problems of women in period of great social change. Strongly humanitarian toward those seeking to hold on to past but disapproving of their reasons and pointing toward need for change without becoming didactic. Zének es Évek considered to be her best work. Also wrote children's literature. Zének es Évek has been translated into Czech, German, and Polish, and some of her poems and short stories into French, German, Italian, Portuguese, Romanian, Russian, and Serbian. Karanthi Frigyes. Born June 24, 1887 in Budapest, died August 29, 1938 in Siófok. Humorist, short story writer, novelist, poet, critic, translator. Father a clerk in Gans factory. Family experienced economic hardships. Completed gymnasium studies in Budapest. Began writing early. His Nagytazes a Fold Kozapant Jafel, a novel, was published in Magyar Képzvilág in 1902. Writings appeared regularly in periodicals from 1906 on, including Az Ujj Szag, Budapesti Napló, Borsemyanko, Humor Magazine, and Budapesti Hírlap. Entered University of Budapest to study mathematics and natural science and then medicine, but wide-ranging interests made strict regimen unendurable and he decided to become journalist. Formed friendship with Deso Castellani, QV, at university in 1906. His short stories and poems appeared in Nyugat, with which he was associated until his death. Widely known as humorist mainly until outbreak of World War I. During war he openly opposed inhumanity and destructiveness of war. Supported October Revolution in 1918. At beginning of 1920s his writings were morbid and not many were published. In closing years of 1920s, he resumed attacks on society in poems, fiction, and articles. Underwent partially successful surgery for brain tumor in Stockholm in 1936. Very prolific and popular writer. Wrote poetry and criticism but best known for humorous writings. First true humorist in 20th century Hungarian literature, and his caricatures of Hungarian and foreign writers in Írtok ti remain his most popular work. His thought was strongly affected by developments of science and all fields of learning, and he believed that man would establish world order based on peaceful uses of knowledge. Criticized all forms of existing governments and societies. Viewed himself as rationalist and encyclopedist. Influenced by ideas of Freud. Noted for translations of Swift and Milne. Capillaria has been translated into Czech and French, Gorby Tukar into Slovakian, Upavozek into Chinese and Slovakian, Tanarur Karam into Czech, Estonian, German, Hebrew, and Polish, Yudazaza Koponyam Choral into English, Danish, French, Italian, Spanish, and Swedish, Yudazaz Ferimitoba into Czech, German, and Spanish, and some of his poems and short stories into Czech, English, French, German, Italian, Japanese, Polish, Portuguese, Romanian, Serbian, and Slovakian. Karman Joseph. Born March 14, 1769 in Losank, died June 3, 1795 in Losank. Writer of novellas, essayist. Descendant of family of Protestant ministers. Completed schooling in Losank. Entered University of Pest in 1785 to study law. Transferred to University of Vienna in 1788 and took position in attorney's office. Correspondence with Countess Miklos Markovich revealed literary bent. Returned to Pest in fall 1791 with lawyer's diploma but did not practice law. Became member of Freemason chapter in Pest in 1792. Formed connections with number of aristocratic families to gain support for Center of Literature in Pest. Founding of Urania grew out of these relationships. Periodical reached 3 volumes 1794 to 1795, which he edited and published and to which he contributed much material. Returned to Losank in April 1795, possibly fearing detention because of Jacobin sympathies. Fanai Hajimaniahi, first published in Urania, 1794, is considered to be the best sentimental work in Hungarian literature and, though linked with Goethe's Werther, is original and has distinctive Hungarian style. Its story of a young girl's unhappy love affair and her fading away brings to Hungarian literature the pre-romantic turning inward for revelation of inner personality. Essays on advancement of Hungarian literature advocated establishment of intellectual center where literary salons could develop and, unlike Kazincsa, he maintained that original writings were more needed than translations. Ability not noted until Ferenc Toldy published biographical sketch and edition in 1872. Fanai Hajimaniahi has been translated into German. Kasiklejos. Born March 21, 1887 in Erskijvar, died July 22, 1967 in Budapest. Novelist, short story writer, poet, painter. Father and assistant technician in pharmaceutical laboratory. Difficult financial circumstances forced him to work early in life. Left school when 12 and became apprentice locksmith. Worked at trade for a few months in Győr and then went to Budapest, where he was employed as iron worker in various factories in Angyalfold. Joined Munkazi Gilet and participated in many strikes and demonstrations. First poem published in 1908, and poems appeared regularly in Független Magyarország by 1909. In 1909 he went on walking tour of Austria, Germany, and Belgium, and visited Paris until he was deported as vagrant. Made literary career his objective on return to Budapest. Joined Social Democratic Party but affiliated himself with anarchical anti-military group in 1913. Founded a Tate in 1915, which became center for young writers seeking new literary forms and opposing war. Among them were Aladar Khamjat, Joseph Rive, and Tibor Duri, QV. A Tate was banned in fall of 1916 but soon revived as Ma. Welcomed October Revolution in 1918 and participated in formation of revolutionary government. Member of Verozmarty Academy in 1918. Also member of Writers' Directory and Directorial Board of Writers' Union. Worked for Kozaktada Sugi Nepbiz Tasag. Did not join Communist Party and opposed Belikhan publicly in summer of 1919. Imprisoned after failure of revolutionary government. Emigrated to Vienna. Continued to edit Ma in Vienna and founded 2x2 with Ender Nemeth in 1923. Returned to Budapest in 1927. Published and edited Documentum for short time and then in 1928 founded Munca, which ceased in 1939. Withdrew from active life during World War II. Edited Alcatraz 1947 to 1948 and The Short-Lived Quarters. Awarded Kossuth Prize in 1965. Also a recognized member of Constructivist School of Painting, exhibits held in Vienna, 1921, Berlin, 1922, Budapest, and Paris, 1960. Important advocate of avant-gardism in Hungarian literature. Early writings showed strong avant-gardism and socialistic themes. Turned next to realism, then abandoned social motifs for highly subjective expression of private and individual thoughts and emotions. His viewpoints much affected by attachment to proletarian class. Novels and short stories are very didactic. Poetry influenced by Walt Whitman. Intended his writings to help with the establishment of a just society in Hungary. Some of his poems have been translated into English, French, German, Italian, Japanese, Polish, Romanian, Russian, Serbian, and Slovakian. Katona Joseph. Born November 11, 1791 in Kecskmét, died April 16, 1830 in Kecskmét. A dramatist, poet, historian, and translator. He was a descendant of an ancient but poor family. Father was a well-educated and extremely successful weaver. Completed studies in PRS schools in Pest, 1802 to 1803, Kecskmét, 1804 to 1807, and Zajd, 1807 to 1808. Knew Latin and German well. Entered University of Pest in 1808. After 2 years in philosophy he studied law. Spent much time in university library. Especially interested in history. Worked in attorney's office while a law student. Passed law examination in 1815 but did not open own law office until 1820. Beginning in January 1812 engaged in theater activity as actor and as translator and adapter of foreign dramas for Second Theatrical Society formed in Pest and Buda, to distress of parents. Unrequited infatuation with Rosa Zapataki, noted actress. Independent attorney January 1 to November 1, 1820, in Pest. First draft of bank ban was not even mentioned among entries in Kolosvar competition. Bank ban published as subscribed supplement to November 16, 1820, issue of 2 Domenios Jayaj Temani, not presented until February 15, 1833. In Casa. Returned as deputy prosecutor to Kecskmét on December 1, 1820, prosecutor in 1826. Died suddenly of heart stroke after very tiring court session. Wrote poems, critical and historical studies, but best known as a dramatist. Reputation based on bank ban, which deals with conspiracy at court of King Endra II. Katona represented Sturmuendi Drang of pre-Romanticism in Hungarian literature, and success of Bankban attributed to presence of this spirit in its language. He was a major force in encouragement of Hungarian theater. Translated and reworked many foreign plays, including some by Kotzebue. Bankban has been translated into Czech, French, German, and Turkish. Kazincsiferank. Born October 27, 1759 in Ursemlyan, died August 23, 1831 in Zephyllum. Organizer of literary activities, poet, essayist, letter writer, translator, language reformer. Descendant of Protestant landed gentry. Lived and educated in home of maternal grandfather until 1767, in home of parents 1767 to 1768 in Alserigmek, where he studied Latin, German, Bible, and religion. Spent year following in Kesmark studying German. Began studies in Saraspatak in September 1769, where he developed strong interest in writings of classical authors, Gessner, Istvan Giongayasi, Q.V., Gyurgy Besenii, Q.V., and Ignac Mazaros, learned French, and practiced visual arts and drawing. Published a geography of Hungary in 1775. Turned to literary activity. His translation of Besenii's Der Amerikaner, published in 1776, brought personal acquaintance with leader of the literary revival. Studied visual arts in Vienna 1777 to 1778 but continued to be drawn to literature. Completed studies at Saraspataka Collegium in 1779. Studied law in Apurges 1781 to 1782. In September 1782 in Pest as law student, where he became acquainted with Gedeon Radi, Q.V. Returned to Regmek in 1783 to help his widowed mother, and sought help of Lorink Orchi, Q.V., in obtaining position, at first without success. Became Freemason in 1784 under the name of Orpheus. Obtained position as honorary deputy clerk in October 1784 through Orchi's intercession and soon became vice notary. Lived in Kassa. Became district superintendent of elementary schools in 1786. Founded Magyar Museum in 1788 with David Barati Sabo and János Batszányi, QQV, but resigned from staff in spring 1788. Did much translating between 1787 and 1791. Began Orpheus, of which 8 numbers appeared 1790 to 1792. Stirred patriotic feelings 1791 to 1792, especially through activity in theater and translations, Rousseau's Contrat Social, Shakespeare's Hamlet, Lessing's Emilia Galati, Wieland's Diogenes. Lost school position and returned to Regmek in 1791 and engaged in writing and agriculture. Arrested for Jacobin activity on December 14, 1794, imprisoned, and released on June 28, 1801, after spending terms in Brunn, Obrovik, Kustine, and Munkox. Lived in Ursemlyan. In 1803 went to Vienna. Also in 1777, 1786, 1788, 1789, 1791, 1792, 1808, 1812, and 1815, stopped in Pest on way home to visit noted writers. Married Sophie Turok in 1804. Attended funeral of Mihalik Sokona Vitez, QV, in 1805. In 1806 settled on estate in Zephyllum, where he devoted himself to agriculture and literary career. Visited Transylvania in 1816. Assigned task of organizing archives of Zemplin County in 1820, which he carried on until his death. Near the end of his life he visited Pannonhalma, Esztergom, and Pest. Died of cholera. Important leader of literary revival for many years through numerous translations, voluminous correspondence, original works, and efforts to reform Hungarian language. Helped to shape the course of literary development and taste in the period. Most important writings are his letters and his memoirs, Paliam Emlékezet, and Fogságom Naplaha, which reveal his personality and attitudes. Most prolific letter writer in world literature. Maintained that translations of important European works would develop quality of Hungarian literature more than original Hungarian works. Edited works of Miklós Zrínyi, Q.V., Sandor Baraza, Gabor Deka, Q.V., János Batthyány, Q.V., and János Kiss. Some of his poems have been translated into English, French, German, Italian, Russian, Swedish, and Turkish. Kamini Zsigmond. Born June 12, 1814 in Alvin, Transylvania, died December 22, 1875 in Pusztakömörös, Transylvania. Novelist, essayist, publicist. Descendant of ancient aristocratic family. Entered Catholic Gymnasium in Zalitna in fall 1820 and Reformatus Collegium in Nagyenit in 1823. Father's death in December 1823 created extended disputes over estate between children from two marriages. He was taken by his mother from Alvin to Pusztakömörös estate in 1824, from Pusztakömörös to Alvin in 1826 to carry on claims to inheritance, and from Alvin to Magyarkaput in 1830. Completed studies in law and philosophy at Collegium in Nagyenit in 1834. Attended Parliament in Kolozsvár in 1834. Lived with mother in Magyarkaput 1835 to 1836. Moved to Mérszékesfehérhely in 1837, where he became apprentice lawyer, and then to Kolozsvár in 1838, where he became clerk in Governor General's office. In 1839 went to Vienna, where he spent a year and a half attending lectures at the university and forming plans for literary career. Returned to Kolozsvár in 1841 and became affiliated with Erdélyi Híradó, from which he resigned in June 1843. Began affair with Odelia Was in 1843, did not lead to marriage because of her mother's objection. Met Mihaly Városmarty, Q.V., and Ferenc Deák during visit with Miklós Wesselényi in Zsibo in 1845. Became acquainted with István Székely and Lajos Kossuth in 1847. Went to Pest in 1847 and become staff member of Pesti Hírlap. Became honorary member of Academy in December 1847. Visited Venice in 1847. Parliamentary representative of Kolozsvár district in 1848. Resigned from Pesti Hírlap. Fled to Debrecen with Kossuth government in 1849. Moved with government, as advisor to Ministry of Interior, to Pest, Zsd and Arad, and hid in Satmar County before surrendering to Austrian authorities in Pest, who dismissed his case in 1851. Unhappy love affair with Maria Lónyai terminated in 1855. Became editor of Pesti Naplo in 1855, for which he wrote numerous lead editorials. Left editorship in December 1856 because of financial hardships. Visited Dresden and Munich in 1857. Resumed editorship of Pesti Naplo in December 1857. Visited Munich and Switzerland in 1859. Became member of Kisfaludy Tarsasic in 1860, its president in 1867. Visited Turkey, Greece, and Italy in 1865. Resigned managing editorship of Pesti Naplo in favor of Lajos Erbary in 1868 but remained an editor until 1873. Last articles appeared in 1870. Supported Ferenc Deák against Lajos Kossuth. Resigned as president of Kisfaludy Tarsasic in 1873. Life was always unsettled and troubled. Made special contribution to artistry of historical novel in Hungary. Those dealing with Transylvania are of most lasting interest. Much influenced by German Romanticism. Writings occupied with agonizing human situations. Novels, including social, bear upon present rather than past, upon psychology of characters rather than external events. Deterministic and pessimistic in outlook. Viewed each human personality as under control of particular emotion, and was pessimistic about capability of Hungarians to face inevitability of their unhappy reality with stoicism, as he recommended. Essays and historical portraits believed by some to be the forms best suited to his ability. Özgües Linya has been translated into Turkish, Zordito into German, and parts of his novels into French and especially Italian. Kapis Geza. Born 1909 in Matsalka. Poet, translator. Father a blacksmith. Attended school in Saraspatak, where he was already translating Greek and Latin poets and writing poetry in Latin, and poems were being published in Aro, Uj and Napkalit as well as in number of periodicals in Kassa and Kolosvar. Completed studies in Hungarian and German at University of Budapest as member of Jewish Collegium, but also learned, in addition to European and classical languages, Russian, Finnish, Estonian, Vogel, Bulgarian, and Persian. Taught in Saraspatak, became translator for Ministry of National Guard. Awarded Baumgarten Prize for literary efforts in 1943 and 1949. After 1945 became member of Literary Department of Radio, later its director. Awarded Adela Joseph Prize in 1952. Established Magvito Konivkiatu in 1954. Has served as Secretary of Hungarian Writers' Federation. At present he is a researcher at the Institute of Literary History. Early poems greatly influenced by folk poetry, Impressionism, and Greek and Latin poets. Intellectual quality of his poems increased. Uses great variety of verse forms and techniques. Later poems show strong satirical bent. Develops historical philosophy in poems of 1960s. Epigrams generally praised. Has translated numerous works from many languages and contributed to understanding of lyric poetry through philological studies. Some of his criticism and studies have been translated into Finnish, and some of his poems into Bulgarian, Estonian, and Russian. Kisfaludy Karoli. Born February 5, 1788 in Tet, died November 21, 1830 in Pest. Dramatist, poet. Descendant of landed gentry. Brother of Sandor Kisfaludy, QV. Attended Benedictine Gymnasium in Győr in 1798. Poor student, dismissed in 1804. Immediately entered newly established Officer Training Institute in Győr and became member of Infantry Regiment as cadet, paying own expenses. Fought against French at Caldiero in 1805. Served as border guard in Slavonia 1806 to 1809. Second lieutenant in 1809. Again fought against French around Munich, was captured and escaped. Returned with regiment to Pest in 1809. Resigned from army in 1811 and returned to Tet in August. Rejected by father, found refuge in sister's home in Vinoke. Went to Vienna in February 1812 to study at Academy of Fine Arts but wasted money, attended theater. Saw his limitations in painting. Learned engraving in 1813. Visited Italy in 1815. Back in Vienna in 1816, but went to friend's home in Pasane, returned to Pest in spring 1817. Father continued to refuse support. Unable to obtain employment. Turned increasingly to writing. Presentation of Tatarek on April 18, 1819, in Zakesfeherver and on May 3 in Pest brought him immediate fame, and he began 10 years of highly productive creativity. Began to edit Aurora in 1820 but unable to finance its publication until 1821. Became center of younger writers of Pest, among them Joseph Baja, Q.V., Ferenc Toldi, and Mihaly Vörösmarty, Q.V. Received Marchevani Prize in 1826. Health steadily declined at end of 1829, died of pneumonia. Leader of first generation of Romantic writers in Hungary. Poems show influence of German traditions and effect of instructions of Kalksi and Kazincsa, QQV, and deal with love and patriotism. Stories, mainly between 1822 to 1825, are both tragic and comic, the former dealing with Middle Ages, the latter with contemporary situations. Most important as a dramatist. Wrote mainly comedies dealing with contemporary characters and situations. The comedies introduced characters from patriarchal life, used original humor and novel situations, created natural dialogue in Hungarian drama, and showed the influence of Kotzebue in structure and techniques. Some of his poems and plays are available in anthologies in Bulgarian, English, French, German, Hebrew, Italian, Japanese, and Russian. Kisfaludy Sandor. Born September 27, 1772 in Sumag, died October 28, 1844 in Sumag. Poet, dramatist, writer of tales. Descendant of landed gentry. Brother of Karoly Kisfaludy, Q.V. Studied in year 1783 to 1788, then read philosophy and law at Karoly I Katolikus Academia in Pasina 1788 to 1791. Studied law at home 1791 to 1792. Knew German. Joined army in 1792. Lived in Vienna 1793 to 1796. Sought to marry Rosa Zagidi in 1796, she refused because of his relations with Maria Medina, then consented in 1800. Fought against French in Milan and captured in 1796. Imprisoned in Dragonese but released after 2 months through intercession of Carolina d Esclapon, who had met him during her visit with relatives in Hungary. Went to Klagenfurt and then to Württemberg, where he fought against French for about 2 years. Lived on wife's estate in Cam 1800 to 1805. Increased writing activity. Involved in political matters after 1808. Among the defenders of Hungary against Napoleon's invasion in 1809 and wrote Hazafoizos to rouse his countrymen to action. Opposed ideas of Ferenc Kazincsa, Q.V., with respect to language reform. Received Marchevani Prize in 1820. Wife died in 1820, 2 years later married 20-year-old Amalia Vajda, who died shortly after. Became member of Academy in 1830. Shared 1834 Academy Prize with Mihaly Vörösmarty, Q.V. Became member of Kisfaludy Tarsasig in 1835. Resigned from Academy in 1835. Withdrew increasingly from public activity. Poet of Hungarian aristocracy. Like Dugonix and Gvatonyi, QQV, he was closely connected with European pre-Romanticism, creation of his poetry a product of genius rather than learning. His lyric poetry was influenced by French pre-Romanticism, in addition to Petrarch, and his narrative poems by German pre-Romanticism. His stories taking place in castles introduced the shorter narrative poem to Hungarian literature and dealt romantically with Hungarian past. His dramas were unsuccessful but informative about views and attitudes of aristocratic class. Fame rests on the immensely popular epic lyric cycle, Hymfi, which tells of Hymfi's unrequited love, the narrative interspersed with songs describing nature, praising beauty of women, and complaining of hopeless love, used new stanza form. Some of his poems have been translated into English, French, German, Italian, Japanese, Russian, and Swedish.